Hi, so if you want to know how to make a snare drum sound good in a mix with any Neve 1073 style EQ, then this is the video for you. So let's go! So I recently published a video about a very nice SSL compressor style technique, which did very well. So apparently you like to hear about mixing techniques. So in this video I'm also going to show you a mixing technique which works very well and which I use all the time. Now the particular technique that I'm going to show you in this video, I already shortly explained in another video and I think I even made a short about it, but I figured let's make a full-length video so I can discuss it in a bit more detail and with a bit more time. Now this EQ technique for a snare drum is something I picked up quite a few years ago. I don't remember exactly from which video, but I think it was one with the mixing engineer Andrew Sheps. But I don't know if he was the first one to talk about this, whether this is actually one of his techniques or whether he got it from somebody else again. Like it happens a lot in audio engineering, of course. We all learn from each other. Now this particular technique works with any Neve 1073 style equalizer, a plugin, or even with the hardware emulation from Heritage Audio, which I have back in the rack here. And well, I think we've been hearing 1073 EQs on a lot of the music that we listen to. They were very prevalent in the 70s and 80s, but even now they're still very popular and they continue to be a favorite equalizer. And there are many plugins that emulate this EQ. And this technique basically shows how to boost particular EQ bands on this equalizer. And you may wonder, why does that sound so good? Is it because Rupert Neve somehow managed to choose the magical frequencies to put in his equalizer? Or is it because we've heard this EQ used in so many songs that we've just grown accustomed to how it sounds, and that we now feel that that is the way something is supposed to sound? I don't know, but the technique does work very nicely. So let's get into it in Cubase, and I'll show it in two different songs with two different snare recordings and also with two different 1073 plugins. So let's dive in. Now this is a Cubase project with the recordings of a recent Wash track called No Silence, and I made a separate video showing how we recorded this in a professional studio. So I'll link that video in the description so you can have a look later. But over here you can see that I have a snare group track, and there's a snare top track without any inserts or sends. There's a snare bottom track without any inserts or sends, and there's a snare group without any inserts or sends. So let's have a listen to how this sounds. Yeah, so basically raw snare recordings where top and bottom are already mixed, I think in equal amounts. Now the bottom is a bit higher in level than the top. So let's now put a 1073 EQ plugin on the snare group track. And I will go for the Lindell 80 channel by Plugin Alliance, just because I really like the sound of this plugin. And as you can see, it's a channel strip, so it contains a bit more than just the EQ. It contains a gate, which I'll turn off. It contains a compressor, which I'll also disable. And this is the EQ section, which is now set to 1084 style EQ, so I'll turn this off. And now we're left with all the controls of a 1073 EQ. Now on this particular EQ, you have to enable or disable the filter separately. That's not true for all 1073 EQs, but just for this particular one, so let's enable it because we're going to use it. Now the first move that we're going to make with this EQ is use the filter to filter out the low end that we don't need. And we're not actually really cutting a lot of low frequencies that are in the snare drum, but it's just used to make sure that we don't have any rumble. And basically you're setting this low cut filter so that you hardly notice any change. So let's have a listen. Yeah, I think on 180 you're really starting to notice that some of the real low end that's part of the snare sound is starting to be filtered out. So let's set it to 80 in this case. And I have to say that's usually what happens. It usually ends up at 50 or 80. Now next up we're going to use this low shelf and we set it to 220 because we're going to use this to add body to the snare sound. Yeah, that sounds nice. Now next up is that we're going to add high end with this band, and we're going to add it at 7.2 kilohertz. And this high end is to get a bit of snappiness and aggression in the snare sound. So let's have a listen. That's about enough. And the high shelf, which is typically at 12K, we're going to use to add air and sizzle to the snare sound. Now let's have a listen to the differences. We probably have to take this down a bit because we have all EQ bands basically adding some frequencies, so it'll probably be a bit louder. So let's see what we did. Let's start without the processing and then add it. Yeah, it definitely gives a more open and aggressive snare sound with boost and a cut at exactly the right frequencies. Now before we try this on an entirely different track with a different plugin, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm, subscribe to the channel and ring the little bell icon so you get notified when I publish another video. You can also use the super thanks button below the video if you're really grateful, and if you intend on buying any gear in one of these stores, then you can also use the affiliate links in the description below so I can get a small percentage of your purchase without any extra cost to you. And again, with the plugin on, it is definitely a sound that will cut through better in a dense mix. Now if you want to know how these 1073 plugins and more of them compare to my hardware emulation of a 1073 EQ, I have a separate video about that as well, which you can check out over here. Have a look, enjoy, and see you soon.